Hello everyone and welcome to Start Pause, a podcast about video games. I'm Brennan and I'm joined by the magnificent Bear Luke. Bear, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic.
What are you playing right now?
I've been swapping back and forth between World of Warcraft and Elder Scrolls Online. Mostly been devoting my time to Elder Scrolls Online since the Morrowind expansion came out, so it's pretty fantastic. How about you, man? What are you sinking your hooks into?
I'm actually playing Stardew Valley right now, and it's actually the first time that I've ever played it. I missed it last year when it first came out on PC, but I'm on the PS4 version now, and I can't get enough of it. It is probably my favorite game that I've played this year, and I just wrapped up Persona 5, and you know how I feel about Persona.
I can't imagine playing Stardew on with a controller. I tried with a Xbox controller on PC, and it was pretty rough. But kudos, man.
It's a little weird. But then again, I didn't play it on PC, so I'm not quite sure how it's supposed to control. But I'm totally used to it on console. Like it feels fine to me. It's a little weird because you have to move the mouse cursor with the right stick because you still have to do that.
Yeah.
But. So if you haven't figured it out by now, this podcast is going to be all about video games, and both of us have been playing video games as probably far back as either one of us can remember. Each week we want to talk about different topics, some more timely than others, but we also want to go back and we want to do topics covering certain companies or certain series, hot events going on in the gaming world, just kind of all of it. Well, with that being said, we're going to move on to the first topic today, and we're going to talk about Sony. Now, right now, Sony is beginning to squander some of that goodwill that they've earned over the past couple of years. Rewind a little bit. Back when the PS4 was announced, Microsoft had just announced the Xbox One, and everybody knows the whole DRM fiasco with that. And then it comes out, well, the PS4 is going to, it's not always online. You can sell your used games, and from that moment on, it seems like Sony's been in the lead.
Not to mention the $100 less price tag at launch.
Yeah, I completely overlooked that it was also cheaper. So Sony was totally in the lead, and have been for a few years. But that is starting to change. So if we're going to talk about Sony, let's back up just a couple of weeks. E3, which is everyone's favorite time of the year, and I mean everyone, not just gamers. Everyone loves it. E3 happens, and for the last 2 years, Sony has been on fire. I want to say 2015 was when the Final Fantasy VII remake got announced, the Shenmue 3. It was a big deal. Everybody went nuts. Last year, all sorts of surprises. Days Gone looked really cool. The Spider-Man game looked really cool, even though it was a pre-rendered trailer, but it was enough to get everyone excited. And then Death Stranding, which was weird and confusing, but also exciting. Sony's E3 presentation this year was fine. There was nothing big. Nothing surprising. It was fine. It was totally okay.
It was boring. And I know that I am not really I'm not a Sony fanboy by any means. I don't really consider myself a Microsoft fanboy or anything like that, but just it was boring. There was like maybe a few things they showed that were kind of interesting to me, but overall I just felt like it was, especially like you're saying, after the last 2 years of just like it was like a roller coaster. I think in 2015 it was just like up and down and how it was like messing with your emotions, and this year it was just kind of like, is that it? Is it over? Was that really what we were waiting on?
So I remember we watched it live together, and we were both just waiting, like, okay, when's the surprise gonna happen? When's the surprise gonna happen? And it never did. The surprise never came. Nothing. Zip. I was expecting maybe something about the Resident Evil 2 remake. Hideo Kojima said that Death Stranding wouldn't be there, but nobody trusts the man at this point, so who knows? we were expecting him to show up at the end. Didn't happen. The Last of Us 2 didn't get mentioned, which seems a little odd, but I guess they're saving that for PlayStation Experience later this year. But again, I was underwhelmed with it. I think boring is fair. I appreciate that they showed off plenty of titles, and it was kind of rapid fire. I did like that. All of the companies did that this year, and that was pretty cool. I appreciate that instead of an executive barking buzzwords for 2 hours. I was just expecting that big reveal, and when they got to Spider-Man, I thought, they're not going to end it on Spider-Man.
Right?
They're not going to end it on Spider-Man, are they? It's not that it was bad. It looked cool. It looked like the Arkham games, which if you're going to rip something off, rip off something great. It looked perfectly fine, but I thought, Spider-Man really is the thing they're going to end it on. And a lot of people that I know were just, oh my God, Spider-Man, this is going to be the best game ever. It's like, Rocksteady did this with 3 games already.
Yeah. I don't, it was just like yes, it is a console exclusive for them, but at the same time, it's just kind of like, it's Spider-Man. I don't really feel like that's, and I hate saying this because I love Spider-Man. I'm excited to see, the new Spider-Man movie this summer, but I don't feel like Spider-Man is a E3 show carrying title.
Yeah, and I think part of it is I'll take personal responsibility, not for Sony's conference, but I guess in my head I was expecting, they're going to drop that Resident Evil 2 remake. Last year they talked about Resident Evil 7, which was kind of surprised everyone, and especially me as a big horror buff. I was blown away with RE7, and we got an RE7 demo that night. So I guess I expected something more, and then it's the Spider-Man game is the centerpiece.
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't look bad, and I don't want to crap on Spider-Man too much, because it looks like a perfectly fine game, even though it does also look like a quick time
QTE fest.
I don't want to crap on Spider-Man too much. I like Spider-Man just fine, and the game looks fun. I'm going to play it. But I thought, wow, like that's it. That's the end. That was the wow moment. And I guess for a lot of people it was, but it looked like another quick time fest. That's all it looked like to me. I didn't get anything out of it other than, hey, this is like Batman with some more quick time events, but it's Spider-Man.
Yeah, I mean, as an aside though, do we expect too much from these conferences? I mean, is it actually feasible for these big, like, sort of pants wetting reveals to happen every year? Or is that fair of us to expect that? Or, I mean, what are your thoughts?
I think we all do expect way too much out of E3, and I'm 100% guilty of this. This is proof going in. But at the same time, E3 has become that place where if you've got
your spectacle.
Yeah, it felt weird to not get anything that was, mind blowing like it has been for the last couple of years. So I don't know. I totally think E3 overall, which I don't want to act like I'm just picking on Sony too. I was disappointed with all of it, and you and I talked about this as it was happening, that we thought Ubisoft had the best presentation this year, and I think that's really saying something, because Ubisoft normally does not have a good presentation, and this year they had the lineup that I was most excited about, and I don't know whether to blow my brains out over that or not. Like you said, we put a little too much on E3, so
Which
It was bound. It was bound to happen. There have been lame duck years before. This isn't new. It's not like this is a big shock. It happens. It's gonna happen. It'll happen again. But the big moments that'll happen again. We'll have those crazy years where all sorts of just insane stuff gets announced. But before we get off into the weeds here, I didn't want to talk about E3 this much, but that's, to me, this just felt like the beginning.
It's sort of the not even really the beginning, but it's where it starts. Sony is starting to show its arrogance, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Which, if most people will remember when the PS3 was announced, it was very much a we're on top, and they were at the time. We're on top, and here's our $600 console that you're gonna buy because it's PlayStation. Well, that didn't work out too well. But then we saw it again out of Microsoft. I personally thought the 360 was, I don't want to say the dominant console, because the Wii pretty much owned everything business-wise. The Wii was the best-selling console of that generation. Most of the big third-party games I felt like were on the Xbox 360. And I mean, that's what I played on the most. I had a huge 360 library. That was my preferred platform. So going into the Xbox One, it kind of felt reminiscent of Sony when they announced the PS3. Like it was, well, we're kind of on top right now, so you guys are going to buy it because it's the next Xbox. And then again, it didn't work.
I can't remember the guy's name, but the Xbox president at the time when it was announced, and people were like, well, what about the always online? What about people who can't be online? And he was just like, well, the 360 will still be there. It was just this like brazen arrogance, just like screw these plebes that can't have internet access.
Again, we saw how that worked out. And Nintendo, too. Nintendo's not immune from this. As someone who had the best-selling console, the Wii U, unfortunately, didn't match what the Wii did, which I hate, because the Wii U is so cool and has so many cool things on it. But that's a different topic for a different time. Like I said, we're getting out into the weeds a little bit here, but here's my big problem with Sony right now. They've made some comments lately that are rubbing me the wrong way. And this is the big one. There was a noticeable lack of indies at Sony's E3 presentation this year. And Jim Ryan from Sony actually said something along the lines of, well, it was good to talk about in 2013 or 2014, and it's less relevant now. We have VR now to talk about, for example. And I don't think that's meant as a slight, but just reading it sounds like, really? It's less relevant now? And I actually play more indie games on my PS4 and my Vita than I do the big AAA releases. But hey, they've got VR to talk about now, which nobody I know owns one. I have yet to even see one in a store. I guess, does it have that big of a base?
I think at this point it's kind of like they're going all in on it because they've already released PlayStation VR. So, I mean, if that flops, that's a pretty big piece of or development time, money sink, whatever you want to call it, that hasn't panned out for them. So I think it's probably, I think where he's getting at, from a, I guess, business perspective, is it's like, this is the thing that we should be focusing on. This is the thing that we want you to be excited about, because you already know that you can get indie titles. But
I would have liked to have seen a little bit of an, they normally at least do even just a little reel of indies that are coming out.
Right.
Because,
right.
Like I said, I play more indie games than I do AAA games at this point, and I think a lot of people do the same thing. And it just feels weird to just leave that out.
Here's what bothers me his statement makes it sound like indie games are how to phrase this, that like they're not as important, because like there have been plenty of indie games that have made huge splashes, uh, games that have put AAA titles to shame. I think what's going on here though is they really pushed the No Man's Sky thing for what, like, when did they announce it? 2014.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like they pushed it hard. Like that was where for like those the three E3s that it was shown off at. It was always on the PlayStation uh, stage, at least in some capacity. And they went hard on it. And I mean, we know how that turned out. Uh, I mean, you don't really hear about it anymore.
That's a good point. But when it feels like throwing the baby out with the bathwater
Right.
a little bit to me. Like I really hope that they learned their lesson from hyping something like No Man's Sky to the moon and back.
But it makes the assumption that indie games are the only ones that can suffer from this hype.
Oh, good God! That's everyone knows that is not the case. Which I guess you're not going to get a big one of the big three executives to admit that.
Right. I know these aren't like exclusives, but you look at a game like a Call of Duty or something like that. It's like, well, it's gonna sell. It may not get critical acclaim, but it'll sell. And I feel like that's almost how they feel about their exclusives. It's like, it'll sell. But these indie things, the last one we hyped up didn't turn out so great, which is really just stupid on their part. Because I mean, take Microsoft for instance. I believe during their presentation they showed off Cuphead. That was during Microsoft, correct?
Yes.
And I haven't heard a bad word against Cuphead. And that is a old-timey looking platformer, hand-drawn. I mean, that is not a AAA title. And I think there are people more excited about that than possibly anything shown off in the Sony presentation this year.
I don't even have an Xbox One, and I was more excited about Cuphead than anything, like you said, that Sony showed. I was more excited about Cuphead than anything else that Microsoft showed off either. So, but you never know. This could be it could come out and be a turd. But I hope it doesn't.
It could be a mighty number 9.
Oh no. Oh no! Let's not talk about Mighty Number 9.
Let's not wish that upon anybody.
Oh, what could have been. That's not the only bone I have to pick with Sony. The other problem I have is, and here's our buddy Jim Ryan again, and what he said about cross-platform play. We've got to be mindful of our responsibility to our install base. Minecraft. The demographic playing that, as well as I do, it's all ages, but it's also very young. Now, for anyone who's not in the know, Minecraft is one of the few games that's going to be cross-platform play across the PC, the Xbox One, the Switch. But Sony doesn't want to do it, or they haven't committed to it yet. I think it'll happen, but they're kicking and screaming right now.
They don't want anybody else in their sandbox.
No, but they're going to have to get over that. The big problem I have is that statement about, well, Minecraft has a very young install base. Nintendo is fine with it. I don't know where Sony has been, but when Nintendo was like, hey, we'll partner up and do it. your argument about watching out for the young ones doesn't hold that much water.
Right, because I feel like, and this goes for Microsoft, it goes for the Xbox as well. The older gamers are going to be on the PlayStation. They're going to they're the ones that are definitely going to be on there, because that's kind of where, like, the PlayStation and the Xbox uh, were the more hardcore consoles, and it was something where generally the only people who bought the Wii U when it came out were families with small children, or Nintendo fans like you and I,
Right.
who were just going to buy it because it had Nintendo's name on it, essentially.
Which is
But
hilarious to say, but it's true about Nintendo. You buy a Nintendo console to play Nintendo games. But
yeah,
I
I mean,
digress.
yeah, it's the PlayStation and the Xbox appeal to older gamers. It has older gamers on there already. Do they really think that going cross-play with the PC, which is probably an older demographic, yes, but going cross-play with the Xbox and the Switch is going to make a difference in the kinds of people playing the game?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you said about how they don't want anyone else playing in their sandbox.
It's absolutely that.
And there's no reason for it. There's absolutely zero reason. Now, if Nintendo had said, well, we've got to watch out for the younger players, I'm not giving Nintendo an automatic pass, but that's the kind of crap I expect from Nintendo. You know what I mean? Like, if they said that, I'd be like, well, that sucks, but that's
if there's
Nintendo.
one gaming company that is fiercely protective of their brand, it is Nintendo. This is not a move that I would associate with Sony in the sense that, like, we want to be the family safe. We need to worry, who's going to think about the children? And it's just, it screams of just this arrogant, like, why would we want to hang out with you? You're a lowly Xbox gamer.
You're lower than us.
And let's face it, anybody not PC gaming is lower on the totem pole. So, that maybe they're scared to play in the same arena as us in the master race, but
it's disappointing because the only people that are losing are Sony customers. That sucks.
And it's not just with Minecraft either. It's also extended to Rocket League.
That's right.
Rocket League is a big deal. I mean, it's becoming it already is an esport, if I remember right, or if it isn't, it's on its way. I don't really keep up with esports quite as much as I might need to, but it's something that has a very competitive following, and there's no reason for it.
It feels out of touch and silly to me.
I think they will eventually backpedal. I think this is going to have enough of a backlash that they'll backpedal, but I think it's a case of, the damage might be done. You've got, granted, it's going to be expensive, but you've got the new Xbox console coming, and PlayStation can't claim to be the most powerful console anymore.
That's Sony, man. I feel like they're starting to lose their grip on this cycle, and
Sony is basically Lindsay Lohan's character in Mean Girls. It got a taste of being number one, and it's gotten mean.
We mentioned that this kind of goes in cycles, and it kind of happened with Nintendo on this last generation, because the Wii U absolutely did not perform like the Wii did for a number of reasons. But while we're on the subject of Nintendo, let's talk about one thing that I know that we're both pretty reasonably excited about, cautiously excited, I would say. And that is the Breath of the Wild DLC, which is coming out very soon. By the time this makes it to air, this first DLC pack will be out. And of course, I'm talking about the Master Trials. What do you think of this? Are you excited?
About this one, maybe not as much. I mean, I like that there's a hard mode, and it's going to be a separate save file, so I don't have to get rid of my old one. But I'm not really much of a I don't usually do like hard modes or new game pluses necessarily when I play. Generally I'm there for the story, and this one kind of lacks story,
Yeah. Yeah, this is a lot of it's cool for people that have already just wrecked the game and want more challenge out of it. Then it's awesome, and there's tons of cosmetic stuff that's coming with it too.
Well, and one of the things that's coming that is probably what I am most excited about in this first DLC pack is the Korok mask, because it's supposed to like let you know when there's a Korok puzzle nearby. And if anybody who has played this game knows, there is so many Korok seeds.
Too many, I would argue, but
yeah, it really is not almost. It is too many. Nintendo, why did you do this?
Though it's I don't think it's that bad really, because it doesn't hinder it too much. Like every now and then I'll find myself having to throw away a crap weapon, but
yeah, and honestly, it's not a game breaking thing. It's not something that you're forced to do. I think I have found 120, maybe 130 Korok seeds, and that has given me plenty of inventory space. But the completionist in me is just like, oh my god, there's so much to do here, both in a good and bad way.
I like that it's just bursting at the seams with content, and there's so much to do in Breath of the Wild, which, I mean, we're not going to get into all that because everybody knows by now Breath of the Wild. That would be
its own podcast anyway. So
yeah, we could do an entire show about Breath of the Wild. But the only thing, the hang up I have with the Korok seed thing is I'm never going to find all 900 of these, and I am also a completionist. But oh my god, I have so many other things to play right now, and maybe if the reward was something a little more substantial other than the little token is, hey, you did it, buddy, good job, you found all these. But no, it's not a bad thing, and I don't feel like it's a like you said, it doesn't hinder the game whatsoever. But
that's why I'm excited about the Korok mask, though, is because this will potentially make it easier. Granted, if you really just don't care, you can go online and look at a map or a guide to find all these things. But wearing the Korok mask, you'll be able to more easily spot them. So I feel like that'll make it easier on me while I'm out in the world. If I'm just out and about and I have this on, there might be something that I would have missed, which is often the case.
There's going to be like 600 rocks that you haven't picked up.
But I mean, that's really the only thing that I am chomping at the bit for in
the first pack.
Yeah, in the first pack. We don't really know necessarily what's in the second one, though, other than it's going to be story stuff, and it's called the Champion's Ballad.
Now, like you, I'm more excited about this one just because I want to know what it is. Like, I get, hey, it's hard mode, it's the Korok mess, you find the things and the thing. But I want to see what they plan to do
Well,
as far as trying to expand this story.
and of course, spoiler alert for anybody who has not played this game and doesn't, doesn't want the any of the plot points spoiled, but in Breath of the Wild, the champions are all dead. They passed on fighting Ganon, uh, and part of what you go through is freeing their souls so that they can continue to protect Hyrule with the divine beasts. So, what exactly is it? It very obviously has to do with these four champions, Zelda and Link, because that's who makes up this circle of champions. So, what is it? That's it's very mysterious, and I'm freaking out about it because there's so many things that it could be.
I'm gonna freestyle a guess here and say that you're going to be able to play as each one of these champions at some point during this DLC.
Possibly, and that would be extremely cool. If it, I don't know if it would be like you taking on, like, going back through like memories or something like that and playing as them, or like sort of Majora's Mask style where you take on their form and you have their powers. Um, the only thing with that is, to what end? What threat would exist for you for Link to obtain those powers? Like what need would there be? Because in Majora's Mask, when he got the ability to use those powers through the masks, essentially that soul was in that mask, like it was imparted into Link. So right now, these as of the end of the game, the champions are not retired. Well, they have gone on.
It could be a. I mean, obviously, we know that it didn't end well for the champions.
Right.
It's one of those things where you know that the end's gonna come. You don't know how. I mean, well, I guess you kind of know how, Ganon and whatnot, but sometimes when you know the outcome, and if a story's done really well, if you know where the end game is, the story can be even more tense leading up to that. Just knowing, right, that it's going to happen. When is it going to happen?
And that's what I was gonna say. Is like I see this happening one of two ways. Like this, I think we're going to. What I want to see is the first one is there's some new threat, and either somehow Link is obtaining the power of the champions, like further than just using these abilities that you gain in the current game, but like you take on their forms, or they're somehow being resurrected. Like there's some process of I'm not sure how that would work.
I mean, no, we have nothing to go on other than that it seems very much based around the four champions. So
what I want, though, the second option or idea that I have is what I really want for it to be, and what I want it to be is it goes back in time to an unsullied Hyrule at the beginning of Ganon rising up, and you get to see Hyrule before or at the beginning of all of this.
That would be awesome.
Like
that would be so cool.
That would be amazing. It would be a ton of work though, because you're talking about 100 years prior with ruins or stuff that is ruins in the game right now being towns or buildings.
Yeah, like it's almost practically redesigning about 70% of the map.
Yeah, and unless they've been on this for a long time, it's probably not something that's necessarily feasible. But I would just, that would be amazing.
I feel like that's pie in the sky. It's possible. I don't know how likely, but it's certainly possible. The thing that I'm really interested to see, and this is outside of content, is Nintendo handling DLC. Now, I know this isn't their first rodeo as far as DLC goes, and I feel like they're very hit and miss on their DLC. I thought Mario Kart 8 had really, really cool DLC. Something like Fire Emblem Echoes has a putrid DLC plan that I hope dies very quickly. So I'm anxious to see how they handle Zelda, and will it be worth it?
What it doesn't need to feel like is, and to me this is kind of what this first DLC sort of feels like, is that they carved bits off of the original game to save to hand out to us. I don't know that that's the case. That's just kind of how it feels to me, because I feel like a hard mode is something that should have maybe already been in the game.
Well, you think about past Zelda games, they all have, I can't remember the name of it right off the top of my head, but, it's like the Cave of Trials or something like that, and it's usually like a 100-floor dungeon. It's basically a big challenge run. That's normally in Zelda games from the offset.
Yes, and that is what I'm assuming Trial of the Sword is.
Right. Yeah, because reading about that, that's exactly what it sounds like.
Which I'm excited to do that, but if it's been included in prior games, why was it carved out, and why am I paying $20 to buy that? And that's what I'm worried about. I'm worried that, and this is part of the reason that I'm worried, is if you have done all the shrines in the game and you have used some of your orbs of power to max out your stamina, get 3 full wheels, and then you go to get the rest are hearts, you're missing 3 hearts to have like a full 2 bars.
Right.
And that annoys me. When I see that when I'm playing, it annoys me so much. And it's like, did they leave off 16 orbs just so that they could hand that to us in a future DLC and have us be like, hooray! Because that would be terrible. And I know that's what's going to happen. I don't know, but that's in my heart, that's what I feel like is going to happen here. Even if they somehow do it, if the second DLC is like you're playing through a memory and you get to relive the past, I still feel like that's part of what's happening.
It's not like this is something that has, this isn't new. Companies are carving bits and pieces out of their games now, and sadly, that's just what's happening. I don't like it. I don't want to excuse it, but I recognize that it's going to happen. And I feel like a lot of people are going to argue, well, Breath of the Wild is already so big and it gives you so much content, and it does.
You know what other game is huge? But then when they did their big DLCs, because all the small DLC was free, but their big DLCs were like huge, expanding like on the game, like was The Witcher 3. Witcher 3's base game is massive, and the second or the first DLC was pretty big, but then the second big DLC that they released was as big as The Witcher 2. Like, it added a whole new zone, and it is a perfect example of how DLC should be handled, because it was worth every penny I paid.
Yeah, nobody's gonna argue that The Witcher 3 had really, really good DLC and worth the money.
But my point is, like, they seem to be the only CD Projekt Red is like the only company that seems to be doing DLC right. And I want desperately for Nintendo to take a page out of their book and give us real meaty stuff.
How about a mask that vibrates whenever you get near a Hyrule bass?
I mean, I need Hyrule Bass, so...
Well, that joke just failed. Okay, moving on. Since we're still talking about, since we're still going to be on Nintendo, and this one, you and I have already talked a little bit about this, and we're both kind of conflicted. I feel like I'm definitely conflicted on it. Let's talk about the SNES Classic and all 12 models that they plan to release. What do you think about this? One, it's not a surprise. We knew this was going to happen. We knew it was going to be announced. But what do you think?
I will tell you my initial reaction, and I've had some time to think about it, and I'm a little more on board now than I was when it was first announced. But my initial reaction was, this thing is already, what, is it $10 or $20 more than the NES Classic? 20.
It's 20.
$20 more than the NES Classic. And has 9 less games. Granted, this has a previously never released game on it, but still 9 less games. And my initial reaction was, ugh. And that was without me really considering the titles that they were including on it. But it was just the idea of like dropping $80 to play these older games on a system that, I mean, if you and I'm not necessarily endorsing you go out and, you know, pirate anything, but if you really want to play these games, you can pick them up on ROMs.
And there's other channels too. Like a lot of these are available on Nintendo's other virtual console services,
which
not available on the Switch yet.
Yeah, not available on the Switch yet. But when supposedly when the internet services start, you will have access to their Netflix-esque library of classic games, and I can only imagine a good number of these will be on there. I mean, these are Nintendo classics, but
we're gonna get Mario Brothers and Balloon Fight, and that's it.
That's all we got, man. That's all we got. But like I said though, I warmed up to it a little bit more. Of course, Star Fox 2 being released on this for the first time, even the game designer was like, "Wow, this is actually happening." And that's really cool. But there are some really good titles on this, and if I had to pick, like, if I had to teach, say, a Super Nintendo 101 or something like that, you know, in a college course, there are a lot of these games would be in that course. They would be, you know, staples that you have
absolutely
to play. So that's kind of where I'm at. There's more to it, but I mean, I know you were a little more excited than I was at first.
Oh, I'm a total mark. They got me. I took the bait.
And
no, I'm kind of like I said, I'm cautiously excited. When I first saw it, I was like, "Oh, that's super cool!" And then I saw Star Fox 2, and I thought, "Holy crap, that's finally getting released!" And I mean, all of these other games, like I've played all of these, I've beaten all of these, except for Star Fox 2.
Right.
I have multiple copies of some of these. $80 is a lot of money.
It is.
To play Star Fox 2.
Well, and here's the thing. Despite supposedly that we weren't going to have the same issues as when the NES Classic came out with finding it, pre-orders are already, like, you can't find one except on eBay, where they're being scalped for I don't even want to look.
Nah, no, I will not
I'm it.
pay for I will not buy one from a scalper. Like, I never bought the NES Classic, which I thought was cool, but not cool enough to even buy at retail. And I was looking just out of curiosity. The NES Classic, most of the ones that I found on eBay were still going for roughly $350, and some of them were higher than that.
Yeah,
That
it's
is ridiculous.
in their announcement. They basically say that these are the games that maybe if you're younger you haven't really played. So it says many of our younger fans never had a chance to play the Super Nintendo, which is one of the greatest video game systems ever made. And so this is the library that they want you to experience. That's awesome, because I agree this is an excellent, as I was saying, this is the stuff that I would teach in a Super Nintendo 101 class. This is what I would include in the curriculum. How is the younger folks gonna get this when you can't pre-order one because it's already done and gone? If they're having a repeat of the NES Classic, which I would also argue probably had some of the same, it's one of the greatest, one of the earliest consoles. That's what many people's first, like in our generation, that was pretty much everybody's first console. How is someone in the younger generation going to experience that library without either pirating it or going back and actually buying these cartridges in an old system? Because you can hardly find an NES Classic, and I feel like that's already what's happening, what it's looking like for the Super Nintendo Classic.
Yeah, I don't have high hopes. That's the one thing that really bothers me about this, is that if they're in good supply and they're readily available, I will probably get one just for Star Fox 2, because I am a mark and I am Nintendo's target customer here. Not the young folks. It's these nostalgic 30-something-year-olds that are like, "Oh my God, Star Fox 2!"
And that's the other point to make, is like, okay, if you want the younger generations to try out these games, why is it that you're like, oh, by the way, we're throwing in this game that we never released, but we know you fans really want? It's the fans that ultimately are going to buy this console. It's not about the younger generation. They can claim that, but when you don't put out enough, you have limited quantities, and you create this frenzy, which they've been really bad about doing lately.
Yeah, Nintendo needs to stop.
Like in some cases, in like I know, like right now they're having a problem getting Switches out there because they're actually competing with Apple for parts. But like for stuff like this, you can build a ROM machine for probably less, or you can just use your computer and buy a controller. So it's not like it's something that's really hard to produce. So
Right.
this shortage has to be manufactured. Like it has to be a
Oh, it totally is.
came up with.
It totally is. This is their thing. Nintendo's really bad for this. I know I've already said I'm a mark for this, and I have to admit I saw Star Fox 2 and just was like, oh well, that's it. I'm gonna get one. I'm not gonna pay a scalper for it. I feel like I'm easily that audience that they really want.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna go out of my way and pay all that money to play another set of games that I already own many of on cartridge already and Virtual Console. That being said, that lineup is just so stacked, and I feel like it would be worth the price for Earthbound alone.
Right.
But on that same end, Earthbound is available for $10 on the Virtual Console, on the new 3DS and the Wii U.
Right.
So there are other options to get these, and I know that Star Fox 2 is included just because that'll be the one that will never get a virtual console release.
Right.
Mark my words, it'll never happen.
Okay, I mean, all of this aside, all of the negatives aside, if you had to pick your top 5 games that are on this, not including Star Fox 2, what would your top 5 be? If you were trying to convince me to buy it, what 5 games would you?
Number 1, Earthbound, because Earthbound is the best game ever made, and Nintendo needs to do more with it and stop sitting on Mother 3 and release it over here, you fools. Super Mario RPG, because I think that is just that's one of the best Super Nintendo games and one of the best RPGs I've ever played, which they also need to make a proper sequel to. Now that you're friends with Square Enix again,
right?
You've kissed and made up, so do it. Super Metroid, because it's the best Metroid. I'll fight anyone who says otherwise. I don't think anyone's going to fight me on that, though. Link to the Past, because it's the second best Zelda game, and I will also fight anyone else who says that, because Ocarina of Time is the best. After that, it gets kind of hard for me. But you know what I'm going to say, and this is I hate to do this because of Konami is the worst company, but Super Castlevania 4 is the greatest Castlevania. Yeah, I said it. The greatest Castlevania, better than Symphony of the Night. Come at me. I'll fight any of you. But no, they're all really good. They're really good. But if I had to pick, those would be. I would consider those my Stranded on a Desert Island. Because I still play Earthbound at least once, sometimes twice a year.
Right.
I play that game a lot.
My list is pretty similar. Super Mario RPG is fantastic. I would recommend that to anybody. But Final Fantasy 3, another fantastic RPG. Secret of Mana, which is a fun game. I've always loved it. Link to the Past is definitely one of the best. I'm not going to debate where it sits on the timeline or the rankings, but and then I would actually pick Donkey Kong Country, because that was, for me, that was just such a great experience playing that. It was so much fun.
I came so close to picking Donkey Kong Country. I would have. If it was Donkey Kong Country 2, I would have picked it. I think Donkey Kong Country 2 is one of the best platformers ever. Ever.
But I mean you're absolutely right. It is a solid lineup. But those would be my 5. Those would be the 5 that I would try to convince somebody to buy this.
If you've never played any of these, and you're just curious about the Super Nintendo, then yeah, it's a pretty cool machine. But for the love of God, we already know the audience, the target audience for this thing.
Target audience is fans.
It's not the kids that are like, gee whiz, I wonder about that Super Nintendo that Dad loved. Boy, yeah. I wish I had one. Actually, I'm gonna throw an honorable mention to Contra 3, because that game does not get mentioned enough. Again, I hate to keep throwing bones to Konami, but this was back when Konami was all right. 2 solid games
before they were the worst.
Here's another question for you, just for fun. When the N64 Classic comes out, what should they include on that?
Well, Ocarina of Time.
The best Zelda.
Super Mario.
I'll fight any of you.
Super Mario 64.
You don't have to name like 20 of them.
No, I know.
Give me an entire lineup. But you can't use any first party titles. Has to all be third party.
Has to all be third party. I mean, so
I'm defeating the purpose of them if they ever made an N64 classic. You can't have any of the first party games on it.
Part of the issue with N64 and later is this is when you start branching out into titles that rely, and I know there were some on the NES and the SNES that did this, but you start getting to titles that rely on outside pieces of equipment. Like I almost said Pokemon Stadium, but you need the Rumble packs, or not the Rumble packs, the cartridge packs. I don't remember what they were called, but
the transfer pack.
Transfer pack, that was what it was. You need the transfer packs, but that's not really a thing anymore. I guess you could do a dumbed down version of it, but it's not as fun. Maybe Pokemon Snap.
That's another game that deserves a sequel in the worst way.
I mean, I would throw Harvest Moon 64 on there, but
oh, we're gonna do an entire episode about Harvest Moon.
Hooray!
I don't know when, but we're gonna. But yeah, Harvest Moon 64. So I was trying to be cute, and I was gonna name off a bunch of terrible stuff, but you
Hybrid Haven.
Hey, I love that game. Another Konami classic that no one played, but was super cool. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Start Pause. If you like this episode, please be sure to come back next week where we're going to talk about something else video game related. And on that note, I'm going to go back to tending my crops and flirting with pixelated ladies.
And I'm going to be murdering people.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.